I never imagined that the day I was pushed out of my own son's Christmas dinner would hurt more than all the long years of hard work, loneliness, and even the day my wife died. It wasn't the dinner I cared about. It was the sentence soft as a sigh that tore through everything I spent a lifetime holding together. "You're not expected here for Christmas, Dad." Eric said it quietly, almost politely, his eyes avoiding mine. Brittany stood behind him with one of those polite, chilly smiles that never reached the heart. And the door, the very door to the house I paid more than half to build, closed on me like a cold verdict. What they didn't know was this. For 8 straight years I had paid the mortgage on this home the way a man breathes, steady, constant, unnoticed. And the moment I decided to stop that breathing, their whole world would tilt. Before we go on, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We post new stories every day. And let us know in the comments which city or country you're watching from. My name is Vincent Vince Carver. I'm 64 years old. For 30 years I drove a city bus in Spokane. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid for a simple, honest life with my wife Linda and our only son Eric Dawson. Linda passed away in 2015, a sudden stroke on a cold, rainy Spokane morning. Eric was 23 then. I still remember standing by her grave, hands shaking from the cold and from fear. I promised her I would take care of our son for as long as I could breathe, and I kept that promise. I worked night shifts, early shifts, weekend shifts, took a second job at a garage, skipped breakfast, skipped new winter coats, skipped every little comfort just to save enough for Eric's future. In 2016, I took out a second loan on my old house to cover the down payment for Eric and Brittany's place. I lied to him, said it was Dad's savings. Truth was, it was the price of my old age. From 2017 through 2024, every 15th of the month, $450 went straight to their mortgage. I gave up the retirement trip Linda and I once dreamed about. I gave up hobbies, vacations, comfort, pride. All so my son could walk into adulthood with both feet firmly on the ground. Eric graduated, got a decent job. Life began shining for him. I thought, Linda, I did it. I kept my word. And then Brittany came along. A sweet smile, cold eyes. The kind of woman who moves her partner like chess pieces one square farther away from the people who raised him. Bit by bit, she pulled Eric out of my orbit, until that Christmas door shut in my face. And that was when the real story began. Not the day I made my last payment for their family. Not the day I sold Linda's old car to help Eric fix his roof after the 2019 storm. But on the winter afternoon of December 20th, 2024, when my son looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome at a Christmas I had sacrificed pieces of my life to give him. That was the day I understood something. Sometimes silence isn't patience. Sometimes silence is a warning. And I, Vince Carver, had been silent long enough. That afternoon was so cold that my breath rose like smoke from the old bus I drove for 3 decades. Eric texted me to stop by, said he had something small to discuss. He texted, didn't call. But I still went. I always went when my son needed me. That's what a father does. Eric's home was in Kendall Yards, a polished neighborhood filled with modern houses and curated coffee shops. It was his dream, and the money that made that dream possible was mine. When I stepped onto the porch, the warm yellow light shining through the glass door looked beautiful enough to hurt. Looking at it, I saw every winter I had lived frugally so my son could have this life. Brittany opened the door. Her smile was polite and metallic, the kind that carries no warmth whatsoever. "Hi, Mr. Carver," she said, already glancing behind me as if checking whether I brought any trouble with me. I stepped inside. The smell of expensive vanilla candles, soft Christmas music, a 9-foot tree standing tall like a magazine display. Everything in this house was curated, a life polished just enough to make Eric forget where he came from. Eric stood by the kitchen island holding a glass of wine. He smiled, a small, nervous smile, the smile of a man about to say something even he felt guilty about. Hey, Dad. The air felt heavy enough that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. We wanted to talk to you before Christmas, Eric began. Brittany stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes scanning me like a misplaced item that didn't fit the aesthetic. I pulled out a chair, walnut wood, expensive. I knew because I was the one who paid for it last year when Brittany wanted a more elegant farmhouse theme. What is it, son? I asked. Eric took a breath. His shoulders tightened as if bracing for the blow he thought I'd give. Dad. He hesitated. For Christmas this year, you're not invited. I thought I misheard. The house went unnaturally quiet. Even the music seemed to fade. Not invited, I repeated slowly. What do you mean, Eric? He still wouldn't look at me. Brittany's family wants a formal dinner. They have traditions. And they said, you don't really fit the atmosphere. Brittany added sweet and sharp. We just want a clean, elegant, quiet evening. Nothing too loud. Every word felt like a nail tapping into the coffin of the dignity I had held on to for 64 years. I looked around the kitchen. The red KitchenAid mixer, I bought it. The Japanese knives, I bought them. The Italian sofa, I paid half when Eric claimed his hours were cut. Almost everything in this room carried a piece of me. Then my eyes landed on an envelope on the counter, half opened. The logo of the bank I had sent money to for 8 years. The mortgage amount I knew by heart. All the things I paid. All the things I never asked credit for. All sitting right there in my face. There are moments in life when you don't need someone to stab you. The truth itself is sharp enough. I stood. Slowly. Steadily. I understand, I said. So, I won't trouble you. My voice was strangely calm in a way even I didn't recognize. Brittany shrugged. Eric tried to speak, but nothing came out. I stepped outside. The Spokane wind cut across my face so cold it made my eyes sting. Christmas lights along the street blinked like they were mocking me. I stood in the yard of my son's house, a house whose porch I once repaired with my own hands, and felt something inside me break in two. That was the moment I knew a new chapter was beginning. Not the chapter of sacrifice, but the chapter of awakening. I opened my car door, sat behind the wheel. My hands trembled not from the cold, but from truth. Tomorrow, I would call the bank, and for the first time in 8 years, I would do something I should have done a long time ago. I would stop. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was angry, but because of a different kind of silence. A silence you only hear after you've endured too much for too long, and finally look straight at a truth you've avoided for nearly a decade. I sat alone in my small living room. Linda's old wall clock kept ticking, soft, steady, unforgiving. Every click sounded like it was counting the minutes of my life I had given away, without even realizing it. I opened my filing cabinet. All the envelopes were still there, stacked by year, by season, by each backache I'd had after long bus shifts. I began pulling them out one by one. The paper felt cold thin, but sharp enough to cut. 2016. My handwriting in red ink beside the bill down payment, so Eric has a place to start. I remembered that day clearly. Standing at the bank counter signing a second mortgage on my own home, telling the loan officer I was doing it to give my son a solid future. She looked at me for a long second, the kind of look people give when they see someone sacrificing more than they should. 2017. $2, $450 every month. I could recall each number the way I could recall every callus on my palms. Not a single month missing. Not a single month late. Rain or snow. Back pain or swollen joints. The transfer always went through. 2018, 2019, and then 2020. I paused at that envelope. The corner was wrinkled, probably from a glass of water I left too close on some exhausted night. I opened it. Inside was a letter from a collection agency I didn't even remember receiving, a credit card debt I had never opened, my social security number, but the account holder name Eric Dawson, listed as authorized user. Back then I called the bank. The woman on the phone said it might be a system error. Do you want to close the account? And like the fool I was, I said, "No, it's fine," and convinced myself it was just a mistake. But looking at it now, there was no mistake. There was just a blind father too willing to excuse everything. I sat still for a long time, that letter lying on the table like proof of my own naivete. My phone buzzed a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. Just a screenshot. Nothing more. A status Brittany had posted last night. "Not everyone belongs at our Christmas table. Some people should know their place." I read it 3 times. Each time something inside my chest grew colder. For years I thought Brittany was just a little snobbish. A girl raised in comfort, clueless about how working-class people lived. But no, this wasn't snobbish. This was contempt. And the part that hurt most wasn't her. It was Eric standing by saying nothing, doing nothing. Letting someone speak about his own father that way. Not protecting me. Not correcting her. Not even remembering who sacrificed his old age for him. I braced my hands against the table. My fingertips trembled not from anger but from cold. A different kind of cold. The cold of realization. I stood up. Slowly. Steadily. I walked to the landline on the counter. The kitchen light cast a long shadow across the room, a sharp, clean line dividing the before and after of my life. I dialed the bank. Each button felt like the clang of metal on metal. "Thank you for calling First Capital Bank. How may I assist you today?" The woman's voice was gentle, unaware of what I was about to end. I looked at the November statement. The line that read automatic transfer, $2, $450, $100. I drew a long breath. My voice came out lower, heavier than I expected. "I'd like to cancel an automatic payment." "Of course, sir. Could you verify your account number for me?" I read the numbers aloud, each one clear as if I were reading out the name of someone who had betrayed me. She paused, then said softly, "I see this transfer was set up in March 2017. When would you like the cancellation to take effect?" I looked at the wall clock. The second hand kept moving, uncaring, indifferent, as if this moment wasn't splitting my life in two. "Immediately," I said. She typed for a few seconds. "It's done. There will be no automatic transfers starting next month. Would you like an email confirmation?" "No," I said, because I didn't need confirmation. I needed the silence that followed the silence that told me a door had finally closed, and another was beginning to open. When I set the phone down, the house was completely still. No Christmas music, no laughter, no Brittany, no Eric, no hopes, no disappointments. Just my own breathing, and a truth cold as winter asphalt. For 8 years, I had lived as a walking wallet, nothing more, nothing less. But from that moment on, I wasn't going to be that wallet anymore. I glanced at the pile of papers on the table. Numbers I once believed were for family now looked like deep wounds I had carved into myself. I turned off the kitchen light. Winter moonlight spilled through the window, falling across the envelopes across the years I had lost. Outside, the street lamps shone faintly against thin sheets of snow. Spokane was silent in its usual cruel way, the kind of silence the working poor know too well. I walked into my bedroom. Before lying down, I checked my phone. No text from Eric, no call, no apology, no explanation, only a stillness so cold it burned. I whispered not to anyone but to myself. Tomorrow will be different. And I knew I had stepped over the invisible line between enduring and awakening. And once you cross that line, you never go back. A thin layer of Spokane fog rested over the yard that morning, cold, pale, metallic, the kind of gray that sinks into your bones before you even notice. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window staring out at the backyard. Years ago, Linda used to hang Christmas lights out there with those small, careful hands of hers. It's been 8 years since she passed, But that morning the house felt emptier than ever. Or maybe I simply felt empty in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. The phone rang. The name on the screen wasn't Eric. It was Brittany. Never Eric. Not anymore. Ever since he married her, he let her speak for him, stand before him, and even decide who deserved a place at a Christmas table I once built for my family. I let the phone ring a few extra seconds, not because I hesitated, but because I wanted to hear the pace of my own heartbeat slower, heavier, colder. Finally, I picked up. "Mr. Carver." Her voice sliced through the air, sharp and polished like a knife that had just been pulled from a drawer. "My parents land at Spokane Airport at 2 p.m. Eric's busy preparing our Christmas dinner. You'll go pick them up." Not a greeting, not a request, a command. I slowly sat down at the kitchen table. "Pick them up," I repeated. "Yes." Her tone tightened. "They need someone who knows how to handle luggage, not someone who fumbles." A long silence followed. I could hear the contempt in her voice. Not loud, not obvious, but wrapped in a veneer of politeness that made it sting all the more. The kind of contempt certain people use to cut you cleanly while pretending they never touched you. I closed my eyes. Not to swallow my feelings, but to imprint every syllable, every pause, every breath into memory. I couldn't record her. Washington is a two-party consent state. But I didn't need a recorder. I had the memory of a man who had endured too much for too long, and had finally stopped enduring. I opened the drawer beside me and took out a small notebook, the same one I used years ago to track my overtime shifts. I opened a fresh page, and I began writing down her words exactly as she spoke them. She would never imagine that her own voice, her own arrogance would become evidence the moment the time was right. She kept talking. "This Christmas we want something elegant," she said, trying to sound refined. "We don't want the smell of Mexican food or sounds that don't fit the atmosphere." Mexican food. My back stiffened. Linda had been Mexican-American. She made tamales every Christmas Eve. It was our family tradition. Even Eric used to love it. But now that smell, that tradition, that memory was suddenly an excuse to erase me. An excuse to make me unfit for their elegant evening. I wrote her words down carefully. Each sentence felt like a blade carving into the page. I lifted the phone back to my ear. "Anything else, Brittany?" She inhaled sharply, the sound of a woman annoyed she even had to explain herself. "Just be on time. Don't embarrass us. My parents are accustomed to certain standards. And they don't like being around working-class people." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch long enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum from across the room. A silence that anyone with perception would understand wasn't agreement, but an ending. But Brittany wasn't perceptive. "I'm telling you this so you won't be surprised," she added. "You're family. But not the part of the family they want to see during the holidays. Family." A single word, and somehow it still found a way to reopen a wound. My voice, when it finally came, sounded strange even to me. "All right," I said. "I'll take care of it." No emotion, no tremor, nothing heavy or dark. Just a stillness so calm that it felt like the surface of a frozen lake, perfectly smooth moments before the ice begins to crack. She must have thought my calm meant obedience. Good. And wear something neat. My parents value presentation. Then she hung up. No thank you, no question if I was free, no concern for my time, my health, or my dignity, just dismissal the way someone hangs up after ordering a service. I set the phone down. Then I looked at the notebook. The words stood out sharply against the paper. "They need someone who can handle luggage, not someone like you. Christmas needs elegance, not the smell of Mexican food. My parents don't like being around working-class people. Your family, just not the part they want to see." I read them again. Once, twice, 3 times. Each sentence settled inside me like a piece of cold steel. I closed the notebook and placed it on the table. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, steady flakes drifting down like little white papers, covering something that had long been rotten underneath. At 1:45 p.m., I sat in my kitchen chair with a fresh cup of coffee. The seat faced the window, faced the direction of the Spokane airport. I knew where the Whitmores were standing at that moment, waiting, checking their phones, frowning at the time, arguing with each other in raised whispers. I knew Eric would be pacing, embarrassed, anxious, torn. I knew Brittany would be furious. I knew all of it. But I didn't grab my keys. I didn't put on my coat. I didn't step outside. I lifted my cup. The steam rising from the coffee warmed my throat, gently soothing a cold building inside me. I opened my notebook again and marked the date, December 22nd. A single firm stroke of my pen. On this day, I did not go to the airport. On this day, they began learning that the walking wallet they'd used for 8 years had finally stopped walking. Evening settled over Spokane slowly, as if the sun itself was reluctant to stay and watch what was coming. The light dimmed into a dull, fading glow, like a lamp that had burned too long and was ready to die out. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of black tea steaming in front of me, the Spokesman Review open to the weather page. An unusual quiet stretched across the house, the kind of quiet I had traded 8 years of my life to finally reclaim. The phone buzzed once. Brittany. I didn't pick up. It buzzed again. And again. Then a rapid-fire succession of calls, the screen lighting up like an emergency flare. I turned the phone face down, silenced it, then shut it off entirely. I had driven a bus for 30 years. I'd carried thousands of strangers through winter storms, traffic jams, dark nights, where the only thing keeping me awake was cold air slicing through bus windows. My hands had shaken from exhaustion more times than I could count. And yet not once had anyone treated me the way Brittany and her family had treated me in the last 24 hours. Today, they would wait. I would let them stand under the fluorescent glow of the Spokane airport arrivals curb. Let them watch car after car pass. Let them feel what it was like to be treated as something disposable. Around 4:45 p.m., the sky deepened into a darker blue. The temperature dipped to 39 degrees. And the wind rattled my kitchen window with the soft tapping of brittle fingers. I folded the newspaper, turned on the living room light, poured myself another cup of tea. 5:12 p.m. A car screeched to a stop outside, its tires grinding over the gravel like clenched teeth. I didn't need to look to know who had arrived. Then came the pounding. Loud, hard, impatient. Mr. Carver, open the door. Brittany's voice sharp, brittle, furious enough to echo in my chest. I didn't answer. Are you playing games with us? That was Charles Whitmore. Deep, arrogant. The voice of a man raised in a world where money cushioned every consequence and everything beneath him existed to serve a purpose. His breathing was loud, the kind of sharp inhale people make when they believe they've been disrespected by someone beneath them. Another round of pounding rattled the door, harder this time. I placed my cup down gently. The heat from the porcelain touched my skin, a sharp contrast to the cold hardening inside my chest. I unlatched the lock, opened the door. Cold air rushed in. And there they were. On my porch, Charles in his heavy coat, Linda trembling with outrage, and Brittany, her face flushed, hair, messy, eyes wide like an animal cornered by its own expectations. "Are you out of your mind?" Brittany screamed. "My mother was freezing at that airport. Freezing, waiting for you for more than 3 hours." I stared at her. No anger, no bitterness. Just a calm, so cold it made the wind feel warm. My voice was steady when I spoke. "I'm not obligated to be your family's chauffeur." Charles stepped forward, placing himself between me and Brittany. "You humiliated us," he hissed. "You made my wife stand out there like a servant." I tilted my head. "I thought servants in your hierarchy are the lowest class. So today, she stood exactly where you believe she belongs." Linda's mouth fell open. Brittany's eyes widened as if I'd committed some grave sin. Charles clenched both fists. His jaw tightened until the tendon showed. I didn't move. My hands hung loosely at my sides. My voice when it came was colder than the wind behind them. I didn't come because I'm done being a shadow in your family. Brittany stabbed a finger toward me, her voice cracking with rage and fear. Do you know who you're talking to? Eric gave you a chance to be part of our holidays. And I cut her off. Eric didn't give me anything. I gave. All three of them froze. And don't worry, I said next, lowering my voice to something almost quiet, that dangerous razor-thin kind of quiet. I've kept every word you people said to me, not on a recorder, in my memory. And my memory is very good. Charles stepped closer, the threat visible in every line of his face. His voice dropped quieter, heavier, far more dangerous than shouting. You think you can disgrace us and walk away. You think Eric will take your side. You think our family will let this slide. He moved in until his face was inches from mine. I could see every arrogant wrinkle, every inherited entitlement. Then he said the words I would remember forever. You will pay, publicly. Pay, publicly. Each word fell like a hammer on concrete. I met his stare. In his eyes I saw pride, blind certainty, the absolute conviction of a man who believed wealth could bury any rot beneath it. Then I spoke softly, almost gently. Did you really think I would stay silent forever? He opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand, a small gesture. Yet it made all three of them flinch. I won't serve your family anymore, I said. Not today. Not ever again. Brittany clutched her purse, trembling with fury. Linda turned her face away, trying to salvage her composure. Charles stared at me for several long seconds, then laughed. Not joy, not amusement, a short, dismissive, contemptuous laugh. We'll see, he muttered. His words hit my doorstep like a threat carved into stone. Then they turned, walked back to their black SUV. The door slammed so hard the sound echoed across the dark street. I stood there in the doorway. Cold wind swept through, but I didn't feel cold. For the first time in 8 years, I felt warm. Not with hatred, not with revenge, but with the quiet, powerful heat of a man who had finally taken himself back. I woke up to a gray, low sky hanging over Spokane, the kind of morning that wasn't quite cold but still carried the feeling of something unsettling on the way. I poured myself a cup of coffee. The sound of it filling the mug was soft, steady, like the ticking of a countdown clock. Just as I set the pot down, thunk, the morning paper hit my front door. I didn't think much of it. I bent down, picked it up the same way I had hundreds of times. But the moment my eyes hit page 3, my stomach tightened. Senior man abandons elderly couple in cold weather at Spokane Airport. My photo, a shot pulled from Facebook in 2021 without permission, took up nearly half the page. My hair looked grayer in it, my coat worn, my smile tired from a night shift. They chose that picture carefully, a picture meant to paint me as careless, inattentive, maybe even cruel. I stood at the window, coffee still warming my palm, while everything inside me turned cold. Not because the article was wrong, but because it attacked the one thing I had left, my dignity. The only thing a man has when he's lost a wife, lost a family, lost the things he used to believe belonged to him. I pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table, laid the paper flat, read every word. Elderly couple forced to wait in frigid temperatures for over 3 hours. 45 degrees Fahrenheit is not frigid. It's barely jacket weather. I even checked the weather history app, 44 to 46 degrees F. Cloudy light wind, no rain, no frost. But the article continued, a concerning pattern of inconsiderate and working-class behavior. I closed my eyes. That phrase, sharp, subtle classist, wasn't new to me. I'd heard it 3 days earlier right there in my own kitchen. Brittany's voice echoed in my head. You should know your place. Working-class habits like yours don't belong at an elegant Christmas table. The article used the exact same phrase. Not similar, not inspired, identical. This wasn't coincidence. I lowered my eyes to the byline. By Patricia Monroe, Spokane Review. Lifestyle and community columnist. Not an investigative journalist. Not a crime reporter. A lifestyle writer. Meaning what? Meaning someone fed her the story. Someone pushed it. Someone with a motive. I opened my laptop and typed Patricia Monroe, Spokane Review, LinkedIn. Her profile popped up instantly. A pleasant-looking woman in her 50s, the type who writes about neighborhood events, recipes, small-town kindness. Not the type to chase after airport scandals. I scrolled down. And then my pulse slowed, not from fear, but something far colder. Recent connections. Eric Dawson. Connected 1 day ago. I sat up straighter. Steam from my coffee curled toward my face, but I barely felt the heat. Eric, my son. Connected to the reporter exactly 24 hours before the article went live. That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't timing. That was coordination. The Whitmores weren't working alone. They had dragged Eric into their scheme, or worse. They had used him. I clicked on Eric's profile. His most recent activity connected with Patricia Monroe. Dated December 22nd. Right after he and the Whitmores pounded on my door, right before the article on December 23rd. Step by step, action by action, planned, deliberate. Not just an attempt to embarrass me, but to publicly discredit me, erase my reputation in a single swipe. A 64-year-old widower living alone, no family nearby, I was the perfect target. Because who would believe me? Who would imagine that a man who drove a bus for 30 years, who paid mortgages and bills he didn't owe, had been exploited by his own son and his son's in-laws? They underestimated me. I reached for the newspaper again. The Whitmore couple suffered emotional distress. I pictured Linda Whitmore standing on my porch last night, jabbing a finger at me, calling me a servant. The man identified as Vincent Carver did not respond to calls. Right, I didn't. Because I was finally acting like any wise man does when he's treated like trash. I turned off my phone, protected my peace. But they twisted that silence into cruelty, into a narrative of abandonment. I folded the paper slowly, carefully, as if closing the lid on a coffin. Memory surfaced 2016, signing a second mortgage to pay Eric's down payment. 2018, covering the whole mortgage when Eric lost his job. 2021, leaving a hand-knitted Christmas gift on their porch only for Brittany to make Eric leave it outside because it smelled old. To them I was disposable. A man like that turned into a monster with a single headline. And the signature beneath it, a woman my son conveniently befriended a day prior. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. I pulled open my drawer, took out the folder I had avoided for years, not because I didn't have the truth, but because the truth hurt too much to face. I spread the papers across the table. Utility bills paid by me. The credit card account Eric linked to my Social Security number handled by me. Mortgage statements, 8 years of them, all paid by me. Each page lay there like a vertebra in the spine of a creature I had finally decided to resurrect. I opened my laptop again and created a new folder. Whitmore, Counterattack Files. The letters appeared one by one on the screen, each keystroke a nail sealing a promise. I scanned every bill, every statement, every mortgage notice, every suspicious charge, every transfer, named each file carefully. 2016, down payment. 2017, mortgage start. 2018, support, during job loss. 2020, SSN, suspicious activity. 2021, holiday exclusion. 2024, airport incident notes. Then I created one more document, 2024 Christmas exclusion notes. Text. Inside I wrote phrase used by Brittany, inconsiderate working class behavior. Phrase repeated verbatim in article. LinkedIn connection, Eric. Patricia Monroe, Dec 22. Article published Dec 23. Motive image control class, superiority humiliation. I sat back. The house was silent again. Not empty, just quiet in the purposeful way as if waiting. Outside, Spokane darkened. Streetlights blinked on one by one. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. But the bitterness tasted clearer than ever. In that quiet, I understood something. They believed they could use the press to kill my name quietly. But instead, they woke up a man they should have left sleeping. I closed the laptop, and I whispered low, steady, final, "Now, it's my turn." I never thought the old inkjet printer in my home office could sound so much like a weapon being cocked. But on the morning of December 23rd, each teach echoed through the quiet house like confirmation that a new phase of my life had begun. Not the Vince I used to be. Not the man who kept his head down so others could walk across his back. This morning I sat in front of that printer the way a man sits before walking into court, except this time the court was all of Spokane and the one on trial wasn't me. I printed every bank statement, every receipt, every transfer. Starting from the very first pages of 2016, the year I pulled the biggest sum of my life to help Eric pay his down payment. Then 2017, when the line automatic transfer, mortgage payment, $450 began showing up with the regularity of a curse. I sorted each year into its own pile. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. 9 years, and each year thicker than the one before it. When I pulled out the 2020 statements, a red printed line made my hand stop. J&M Recovery Services. Payment posted. $312,774. A debt collection company. I didn't owe anyone in 2020. I had no delinquent accounts. I remembered receiving a collection letter that year, but Eric said it was a mistake and he would handle it. Handle it by opening a credit line with my social security number. Handle it by letting me pay off a debt I didn't owe. Heat rose at the base of my neck, not anger, but the feeling you get when you finally touch something rotten beneath the surface. While I sorted through papers, my phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor Joe, the one living across from Eric. Figured you'd need proof. Watch this, Vince. He sent a video file. I tapped it open. His security camera showed Brittany standing in her driveway, one hand on her hip, talking to someone out of frame. Her voice was shrill, derisive. I don't understand why Eric clings to that old man. A guy who drove a bus his whole life and dresses like he shops at Goodwill. Then came the line that chilled me. If he sits at the table with the Whitmore family on Christmas, absolutely not. His little working-class vibe ruins the entire atmosphere. Her laugh, after that light, controlled, polished, sounded like scissors gliding across glass. I closed the video. Didn't slam anything. Didn't curse. Just silence, the kind of silence that makes a room feel dangerous. Around noon, my phone rang again. A name I never expected to see lit up the screen. Raymond Tiller, a former co-worker who ran the South Hill Route 8 with me for 12 years. His voice was older, rougher, but still carried that cautious edge I remembered. "Vince, I heard what happened," he said. "You got mixed up with the Whitmores. That's a family that respects one thing." "I'm guessing money," I replied. "Not just money," he corrected. "Control. They manipulate public opinion. They protect image like it's religion. Anyone who embarrasses them never gets peace again." I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting over the stacks of paper spread across my desk. "Good," I murmured. "Neither do I." Raymond paused. "Vince, they'll come after you again. You'd better be ready." I glanced at the 9 years of records, a paper spine of my entire life laid bare. "I'm getting ready," I said. By early afternoon on December 24th, the Spokane sky turned heavy with clouds. No snow, just a dry metallic cold that made every breath sound sharper. I pulled out 12 black file folders, the kind I used to store maintenance logs back when I drove the night shift. On each folder, I placed a clean white label, Guest 1, Guest 2, Guest 3, all the way to Guest 12. I began filling them. Inside each folder, I placed the 2016 down payment statement, the 2017 to 2024 mortgage records, utility bills I paid, the 2020 debt collection notice, photos of Brittany showing off the house online, a printout of the smear article, notes from her insults, word for word, a screenshot of Eric connecting with Patricia Monroe, a timeline of the article's publication, a written description of the neighbor's video. I reviewed each folder. Each one felt like an arrow. Sharp, clean, ready. 12 guests would sit at Eric's Christmas dinner. 12 people would receive these files. This year I wouldn't be excluded from the table. This year I would place the truth directly on it. I stood up and exhaled. The house felt darker than usual. Maybe it was the winter light. Maybe it was me. I looked out the window. Across the street, a family was stringing Christmas lights. Children chased each other through the yard, their laughter carrying through the cold. Last year, that sound made me feel alone. This year, it made me certain. They had attacked my reputation, used the press to crush me, expected me to retreat back into my shadow. They forgot something important. A man can endure a lot, but a betrayed man starts calculating. I packed the 12 folders into a lockbox, snapped the latch closed. The small click echoed like a seal on a verdict. I stared at the box and whispered, "Tomorrow night, I'm not going to dinner. I'm going to deliver an ending." Christmas Eve in Spokane carries a particular kind of light gray cold, but not bleak. It's the kind of light you see right before a true winter storm, a calm so unnatural it tells you it isn't calm at all. I drove my old Ford Fusion through the clean stone streets of Kendall Yards, past boutique shops wrapped in green and red wreaths, past children laughing outside an ice cream parlor, past adults scrambling for last-minute gifts. Everyone felt festive except one man. Me. Eric's house sat at the end of a gentle slope on the corner of West Summit Parkway. From a distance, the place glowed, lights blazing from every window, as if the house wanted to shout to the entire neighborhood, "We are the most elegant home on this street." I parked half a block away, turned off the engine, but stayed inside the car for a long moment. My hands rested on the steering wheel while the reflection of Eric's dining room lights flickered across the windshield. That house, the living room, the kitchen, the garage, the backyard, all had parts of my money sealed inside the drywall. Claude Whitmore could brag all he wanted about his wealthy family. But this house, he didn't buy it. I did. I paid. I sacrificed. And yet somehow, I was the one barred from Christmas dinner in the very home I helped build. I stared up at the glowing windows. Warm, honey-colored light spilled from the dining room. Inside, silhouettes moved. Laughter drifted out in soft bursts. Then I caught Brittany's voice. She was telling some story, likely one that made her look more charming, more refined. I heard glasses clink, her heels striking the hardwood floor, her parents laughing too loud for the space they stood in. It was a performance, one they'd been rehearsing their entire lives. And I, the man who kept that dining room light on for 8 years, stood outside like a stranger. I opened the car door. Cold air rushed in, stinging the bridge of my nose. I stepped out and pulled my worn wool coat tighter. The wind carried scents from nearby homes, meat roasting, wine opening, and something people like to call holiday warmth. None of it belonged to me anymore. I crossed the street, each step slow, measured, as if walking too fast might shatter something. But truth was, what needed to break had already broken years ago. I stopped beneath the dining room window. Through the clear glass, everything unfolded like a perfectly framed scene. Brittany, in her tight red dress, head tilted at the exact 45-degree angle she always used when she wanted to look polished, laughing too loudly at her own story. Charles Whitmore stood near the bar cart pouring expensive scotch as if he owned the house. Linda fussed with the tablecloth even though it looked flawless already. They were actors in a play I had never been given the script to. But what made me still was Eric. He stood at the far end of the table, trying to look cheerful, failing at it. His eyes told the truth his smile couldn't. He fiddled with his wedding ring, the same anxious habit he had since age 6 whenever a teacher scolded him. Even at 34, my son still wore the expression of a boy desperate to please everyone. Everyone, except his father. A memory hit me with no warning. Eric at age 10. Christmas Eve. I had just finished a long night shift, legs numb from the cold. I opened the front door and the lights inside were glowing soft and warm. Eric ran toward me, wrapping his little arms around my leg. "You're home." "Dad, were you tired? I saved gingerbread for you." I could still smell the child-sized shampoo on his hair. Still, see the crooked card he placed under the tree. "I won't let you be alone, Dad." I blinked and came back to the present. That boy, that promise was gone. Now he stood behind a window toasting a family that viewed me as the dirt beneath their shoes. The hug was gone. The card was gone. But the memory was sharp enough to open a wound in my chest. Not enough to break me, just enough to wake me. Cold wind brushed against my neck like a whispered reminder. Stop pretending. I inhaled, deep, steady, cold enough to settle something inside me. I turned away from the window and walked back to the car, opened the rear door, picked up the box of 12 black folders, heavy solid, its metal edges cold under my fingers. This wasn't paper anymore. It was evidence. It was truth. It was 8 years' worth of being used and discarded. I tucked the box under my arm, closed the door, and walked up Eric's stone pathway. Each footstep counted down 1, 2, 3, up the steps, to the door, to the threshold that had pushed me out for 8 long years. I placed my hand on the stainless steel handle, the one I paid for when Brittany said she wanted something cleaner for the aesthetic. The metal felt ice cold. I turned it. The door was unlocked. Of course. People who believe they're above everyone else rarely fear intrusion. I opened it. Warm light spilled across the entryway, reaching toward me like a taunt. The noise in the dining room halted instantly. I stepped inside. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood, slow, deliberate, heavy. Brittany was the first to turn. Her smile froze. Her wineglass tilted dangerously. Charles stared at me like I was a stain on his imported rug. Linda recoiled half a step. Eric looked at me like he was seeing a ghost he hoped would never walk through this door again. The room went dead silent. I stood at the threshold, the box of files in my hand, the warm light outlining my face, making everything about this moment too clear, too sharp. I looked at each of them and said in a voice quiet and cold as winter water, "I'm exactly where I need to be." The silence thickened. No laughter, no clinking of silverware, no background Christmas carols, just the sound of someone's heart pounding in a room suddenly too bright. Tonight, I said, Christmas isn't yours alone. And with that, I stepped further inside, uninvited, unwanted, bringing with me the storm that had waited 8 long years to break. December 24th, 2024. Evening. The room was still full of people, still glowing with warm yellow light, still scented with roasted meat and cinnamon. But the moment I stepped inside, everything froze as if someone had plunged the entire house into ice water. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. No one wanted to be the first to break the silence. I walked toward the dining table. Each step echoed on the hardwood, steady, deliberate, like the beating of a drum announcing the inevitable. I set the box down in the center of the table. The reflection from Brittany's prized Japanese knife, set the one she bragged only people with taste owned, caught my face in the polished steel. Not the face of a bowed father, not the face of an unwanted guest, but the face of a man carrying the truth. I opened the box, pulled out the first folder. No one moved. Even the Christmas music had been turned off. Brittany must have killed it the moment she saw me. I placed the first folder in front of an older woman near the head of the table. She looked up at me, confused, polite, the kind of person who isn't used to drama, but can sense when something serious is unfolding. "You might want to look at that," I said softly, my voice low, steady, stripped of hatred. I moved on. The second folder, the third, the fourth. Each time a folder hit the table, a soft thud broke the room's fragile quiet and turned every head toward me. 12 folders, 12 guests, 12 truths laid neatly before them. When I set down the final one, the room was silent in a way that felt physical. Then the sound of paper rustling. Slow. Careful. Like classified documents being read for the first time. At first, ordinary curiosity. Then the shift. The older woman opened her eyes wide, pressing a hand to her chest. Her husband leaned closer, murmuring, "My God, what is this number?" A younger woman whispered, voice trembling, 230,000. In mortgage payments alone. A man, probably one of Eric's co-workers, flipped to the 2018 statements, jaw tightening. Brittany took a step forward, snapping, "Everyone stop! What is this?" But nobody answered her. Nobody was listening to her anymore. They were too busy reading the truth. Then the moment I had been expecting arrived. A bald man with broad shoulders, a retired police lieutenant and longtime friend of Charles, spoke up, voice calm but sharp. "There are things here that aren't legal." The entire table turned to look at him. He held up a page, the 2020 recovery statement. "Payment to J&M Recovery Services," he read. "Are you saying you paid this debt?" he asked me. I met his eyes. "I didn't owe anyone anything," I said evenly. "But I got a collection letter, and Eric handled it." I tilted my head toward the files. Now I know what handling it meant. Whispers spread around the room. A woman asked, "You mean Eric used—" "Your information?" Brittany lunged forward, snatching papers from her hands only to drop them all over the floor. Sheets scattered like startled birds. "No, nobody knows what he's talking about. He's ruining our Christmas." Her voice was too high, too sharp, the kind of tone that stripped away any illusion of class. She crouched to gather the papers, but her hands were shaking. A man across the table, one of Charles's business acquaintances, said loudly, "But the numbers match. These are real bank statements." The murmurs grew louder. Eyes turned toward Eric. Eric stood. Not fast. Not confident. He looked like someone waking from a nightmare only to discover it was real. "Dad," he whispered, staring at a folder as if it were a verdict. "You gave these to everyone." I didn't look away. I gave the truth. Eric shook his head, voice cracking. "Dad, you can't do this in front of everyone. It's Christmas. I just wanted respect." I cut in. My tone was so low, even Brittany froze. "Respect?" I repeated. 8 years, Eric. In everything you did, everything Brittany said, everything the Whitmores did, was there any respect for me? No one answered. No one dared. Only the sound of paper turning and the strained breathing of a room collapsing. Charles charged toward me, face red, desperate to take control back. "He's lying. This." He held up a statement. "This is just misinterpretation." The retired lieutenant spoke again, his voice calm but cold. "No. These are authentic documents. Bank stamps, routing numbers. Everything checks out." He looked straight at Charles. "But this 2020 debt, if Eric used his father's SSN without permission, that's a federal offense." The room froze. Brittany stared at Eric, the sophistication drained from her face, leaving nothing but anger and fear. "Eric, say something. Explain it. Tell them." Eric looked at me. The boy who once promised he'd never let me be alone now stood trembling in front of 12 strangers. "Dad, I didn't think it would go this far. I nodded once. That's right, I said quietly. You never thought beyond yourself. Eric's shoulders collapsed. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. No one moved to pick it up. Brittany spun toward the others, her voice desperate. Don't believe him. He's unstable. He's trying to destroy our family. But this time, no one believed her. No one looked at her. They looked at the papers. They looked at Eric. They looked at me. The truth placed on a Christmas table, whether beautiful or ugly, cannot be hidden. I scanned the room. Faces twisted with confusion, anger, disgust, betrayal. Tonight wasn't festive anymore. Tonight was an audit. A reckoning. A Christmas of exposure. And standing there in the dining room, I once hoped to be welcomed into, I realized the storm I brought had finally fully broken. The atmosphere in the dining room had changed. No more clinking glasses, no more theatrical laughter. Now every guest held the truth in their hands, heavier than any Christmas gift they'd ever received. Charles Whitmore, the man who always believed he was the most powerful voice in any room, was the first to try reclaiming control. He stepped forward, shoulders rigid, chin lifted high, as if he were standing in a Spokane Business Council meeting. Mr. Carver, he said, forcing his voice into something calm, but it scraped like sharpened metal. You don't understand class. Private financial matters are not something to display on a dinner table like someone from the lower tier of society. I looked straight at him. No smirk, no sarcasm, just silence. A silence so cold Charles braced a hand on the table as if he had slapped himself. Before he could speak again, a woman's voice rose from the middle of the table. Mr. Whitmore, that's inappropriate. Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Daniels, Eric's neighbor, known for being gentle and never involving herself in conflict. She placed the file on the table, her voice trembling, but determined. Mr. Carver paid over $230,000 to keep this house standing. That isn't lower class. That's responsibility. That's a father's love. A man sitting beside her nodded hard. I've never seen anyone pay their kid's mortgage for 8 years straight. I'm not sure I'd do that for my own son. Another guest spoke up. Eric used his father's SSN for credit. That's not something you brush aside. Then near the end of the table, a silver-haired man, Brittany's real estate attorney friend, adjusted his glasses. The 2016 down payment. If misreported on taxes, that could absolutely escalate to a federal issue. And based on these documents, there are serious inconsistencies. His words hit the room like stones dropped into water, and the ripples spread everywhere. Brittany's face drained, then flushed red with anger. She snapped, voice sharp as shattering glass. No one has the right to believe this. No one. You don't know him. He's lying. These papers could be fake, Eric. Say something. But Eric said nothing. He stood frozen, staring at the J&M Recovery Services page, the one piece of evidence he couldn't escape. Nobody defended Brittany. Nobody even seemed to hear her. Instead, a younger woman, a friend Brittany had invited to elevate the evening, narrowed her eyes. Wait. Brittany, you told us you and Eric built this house financially. You said Eric was the most stable man in your group. Brittany's face collapsed. Her lips pressed together until they turned white. That was just simplifying the story. Her voice cracked. Simplifying, the woman repeated. You told everyone here that Eric's father contributed nothing. You said he was unrefined, uneducated, and not suitable for your new social circle. The room tightened like fabric stretched to tearing. Charles moved to intervene, lifting a hand as if to shield his daughter. That's enough. Everyone. But he was interrupted by the one person he never expected to contradict him. Eric. His voice was small, shaking, but it cut through the air. Brittany, what exactly did you say about my father? Brittany turned to him, terrified, as if the ground had shifted beneath her. Eric, you have to listen to me. I was just trying. What did you Say. The room went silent. Brittany stepped back. Eric stepped forward. All the polished elegance in the room crumbled with every breath they took. Tell me, Eric said, voice breaking, what you've been saying about my dad. I only wanted people to think you had a better family, a more refined background. Who asked you to fabricate that by tearing my father down? Eric demanded. Do you even know what he's done for me? Do you know how many years he paid this mortgage? Brittany's throat tightened. I just wanted to fit in with my family. I took a single step closer. Not threatening, just anchoring the truth. You never wanted to fit, I said, voice cold. You wanted to repaint Eric's life by erasing me from the picture. No one argued. Everyone knew it was true. Charles slammed a hand onto the table. That's enough, Mr. Carver, you don't I looked at him. Just a look. Charles shut his mouth instantly. The room erupted into whispers, clattering breaths, the uneasy shifting of chairs. The Whitmores' elegant Christmas dinner had become the scene of a cascading collapse. Their reputation, their polished image, Brittany's curated narrative, their perfect family facade, all falling apart layer by layer. And Eric, the only one in the room not running, turned to me with a question I had waited almost a decade to hear Dad. How long did you endure all of this? I met my son's eyes. No anger, no resentment, just the truth. 8 years, Eric. 8 years you chose to listen to people who never loved you the way I did. The whole room went still, like a death. Christmas Eve, usually a night of peace, had become a night of revelation. And the Whitmore family finally understood they had lost to the man they spent years looking down on. December 24th, 2024, near midnight. No one in the room looked elegant anymore. No sparkling smiles, no polite chatter. Even the warm golden light seemed to dim under the weight of the tension pressing on every inch of the dining room. In the middle of all that heaviness, Eric was the first one to break. Not with tears, not with a dramatic collapse, but by simply standing still, both hands braced against the table, head bowed, as if the weight of the truth was grinding him into the floor. The middle-aged man seated beside him quietly slid his chair back, as though even standing next to Eric might make him crumble faster. Eric lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from panic. Dad! His voice cracked apart. I didn't know it would turn into this. No one interrupted. Everyone waited because everyone knew this night still had truths left to surface. Eric looked around the room like a man trying to find an exit in a burning building. But the doors were locked. Not with bolts, but with facts. And no one escapes facts. Eric finally faced me. I deleted all the photos of you from the house because she said you made her family look bad. A low gasp rippled through the room. Brittany reacted instantly. Eric, you can't say that in front of everyone. That's private. Eric snapped toward her, and for the first time that night there was fire in his eyes. Be quiet. The entire room froze. This whole night is because of you. His voice shook, but every word landed like a hammer. You wanted everyone to think we were perfect. You pressured me to lie about my father. You pushed me to cut him out. Brittany's face flamed red, hands gripping the hem of her dress. I did that for us, she screamed. You're too easily influenced. If you don't keep some distance from people like that. The whole table recoiled. People like that. Every syllable was a slap across the air. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The guests spoke for me. An older woman. The same woman who once complimented me for being warm and polite at a neighborhood gathering stood up. Her voice colder than the snow outside. Brittany, I used to like you, but what you just said is disgraceful. A man shook his head as he grabbed his coat. What kind of family treats a father like this? A couple exchanged a look, then rose. We should leave. A phone clattered onto the table, dropped by someone rushing to get up. A room once filled with curated elegance was dissolving like watercolor in the rain. Charles Whitmore tried to regain control. Everyone calm down. This is still Christmas Eve. People can't just... We can. A guest cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. Pretending won't make this classy, Charles. Then the first guests walked out. Then the second. Then the third. Soon only a handful remained, not because they supported anyone, but because they knew they were witnessing a scene that would be talked about for years. Amid the chaos, Eric turned to me again, his voice breaking. Dad, I knew she used your SSN in 2020. A glass shattered somewhere. Brittany trembled. Eric dragged a hand through his hair, bending over as if punched in the gut. I knew I got the collection notice. I saw the debt wasn't yours. He hit his chest with a closed fist. I was scared, Dad. His voice collapsed into that of a child. I was scared she'd leave me, scared I wasn't good enough, scared people would think I'm a failure. So I stayed quiet. No one spoke. The only person suffocating was Brittany. She stepped backward, bumping into a chair. Eric, you're destroying everything I did, all of this, so we would look like we belonged. Eric stared at her like she was a stranger. You built our image by tearing other people down, by turning my father into something you had to hide. Brittany opened her mouth, but I lifted a hand. Not high, not threatening, just enough to stop the noise. Then I spoke, my voice low, calm, and heavy as iron. Brittany, I don't need you to like me. I don't need your respect. She shook with rage, stepping in front of Eric like a shield. Don't lecture me. I looked at both of them, then said, I only need the truth to speak. I pulled out my phone, opened the video Joe had sent. No audio, but the footage was enough. Brittany, standing outside her garage, face twisted in disdain, delivering the same insult she never thought anyone would hear. I placed the phone on the table, not forcing anyone to watch. But they watched. Every one of them. Every sneer, every degrading comment, every flicker of contempt on her face played out in perfect clarity. The silence afterward was sharp as broken glass. Brittany slapped a hand over her mouth, stumbling backward as if dragged into darkness. I didn't think anyone heard. Eric stared at her like seeing the truth of his marriage for the first time. You said all that about my father? Her voice cracked. Eric, I did it for us. Eric cut her off. No, you did it for you. No more guests left. They stayed not out of loyalty, but because they were watching a family collapse in real time. Eric dropped into a chair, hands covering his face. Dad, I've been awful. I let everyone control me. I abandoned you. I stayed silent when Brittany did all that. I deserve... I stepped closer. Not to comfort. Not to wrap my arms around him like cheap cinema. Those days were long gone. I rested my hand on the back of the chair beside him, not touching him. And I said a sentence the entire room would never forget. Eric, I don't need your apology. He slowly lifted his head, eyes red, voice trembling. Then, what do you need? I looked at my son. No anger, no pity, just the bare truth. I need you to understand that the truth always speaks. No matter how long you stay silent, it finds its way back. Eric broke, not theatrically, not loudly, but with the quiet, devastating tears of a man who finally realizes he was used for years, and worse, that he allowed it. Brittany turned to her parents for rescue. Charles avoided her eyes. Linda looked away. The very family she believed would always lift her up, abandoned her first. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, cutting through the quiet like a blade, I knew their real reckoning was only beginning. January-March 2025. Some winters slip by like a breath, but the winter after that, Christmas Eve, the winter of 2025, hung in the air like a sentence. A sentence for people who believed they could live off someone else's kindness forever. A sentence for people who believed cruelty would never circle back to their door. I didn't have to take revenge. I just stood still and watched karma do the rest. January 15th. Unpaid. February 15th, unpaid. March 15th. Batched payment. 0. They tried to manage. Sold old furniture on Facebook Marketplace. Smiled tightly at neighbors. We're just reorganizing finances. Just a small hiccup. But the truth wasn't small. And on March 12, 2025, the bank delivered the blow. Notice of default. Your account is past due. $8,450. If unpaid within 14 days, foreclosure proceedings will begin. In an instant, the Dawson Whitmore luxury home became a ticking bomb. Worse, no one was standing behind them now. Not me, not their image, not their stories. Just consequences. Brittany's karma came quietly. It didn't come from the bank, not from public humiliation, not from online backlash. It came from silence. Her dental clinic, the place she bragged about, the place she used as proof of her class, began receiving a wave of one-star reviews. Disrespectful attitude, classist behavior, looks down on older patients. No one named her directly, but everyone knew. Rich people don't scream. They simply stop returning. The late February staff meeting shattered her more than the night I laid the files on her Christmas table. Her manager said exactly 4 words: fix your behavior. Immediately. She had no one left to blame. So she blamed Eric. That's when their marriage stopped cracking and began breaking. Charles Whitmore's karma was subtle but sharp. This was the same man who stood on my porch demanding, "You will pay publicly." In February, he was the one receiving a letter from the HOA conduct causing neighborhood conflict. Disruption of community environment. No fine. No major penalties. But for a man who built his entire identity on being respected, a letter like that was a cold nail driven straight through his pride. Charles stopped going on morning walks, stopped showing up at the Saturday social club, avoided neighbors like a man avoiding sunlight. Silence is the harshest punishment for someone addicted to attention. And Eric, his punishment came from inside. Not from the community, not from the bank, not from Brittany, but from himself. Stress, insomnia, panic every time the phone buzzed. On February 10th, his supervisor called him into a small conference room, frosted glass, bright LED lights, and a tone Eric told me he'll never forget. "Eric, your performance this quarter has dropped sharply. Is something going on at home?" He told me. He just nodded. He couldn't form a single sentence. That was the moment he realized. No one destroyed his life except the very people he abandoned his real family for. People who mocked him, controlled him, used shame as a leash. March 18th, 2025. The night. Eric came to my door. It was cold enough for every exhale to become white smoke. I heard tires crunch in my driveway. Fast footsteps across the gravel, not angry, not demanding. Desperate. I opened the door. The man standing there was not the Eric from Christmas photos, smiling stiffly in expensive coats among people who never truly loved him. This was the real Eric, eyes red. Shirt wrinkled from 3 nights of broken sleep. Hands trembling from fear that he'd lost the only relationship that still mattered. "Dad," his voice was scraped raw. I don't have anyone left to talk to." I stepped aside, not inviting him in, just moving out of the way. And he understood. He walked into my home for the first time in months. He looked around the freshly repaired kitchen, the new wooden table bought with the money I no longer poured into their mortgage. His eyes sank. Every new item was a reminder of what he had taken, and what he had lost. "Dad." He collapsed into the chair. "I let Brittany control too much. She told me if I wanted to be respected, I had to distance myself from you." His hands clenched. I was a coward. I protected my wife, protected our image, protected everything, except the man who raised me. Wind hit the siding outside, a sudden sharp reminder of winter. I didn't speak. Eric went on, voice hollow. "I knew she used your SSN in 2020. I knew the debt wasn't yours. I knew. I was scared. And I stayed quiet. The temperature in the room dropped with every word. Then Eric did something he had only done once before in his adult life. He cried. Dad, I'm not here to ask you to pay the mortgage again. I'm here because I want you in my life. The right way. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I spoke, each word hammered into the table between us. Eric, I don't need an apology. I need change. He lifted his head, eyes raw, breathing unsteady. From now on, I continued, if you want a father in your life, you'll live like a man who respects others, not someone chasing hollow status, not someone letting others control how you treat your own family. Eric nodded, shaking but sincere. I lifted the notice of default and placed it in front of him. And that house, I said quietly, that's no longer my responsibility. Eric closed his eyes. For the first time he understood the real cost, not the money, but losing the trust of the one person he believed would never walk away. And sometimes, that's the only kind of pain that can save a man. November 25th, 2025, Spokane Valley. The morning in Spokane Valley is colder than usual. The wind carries the smell of fresh snow and the sun barely clears the eastern ridge, a thin silver line cutting through the clouds. I stand on my porch with a hot cup of coffee in both hands and it hits me. It has been exactly 1 year since the worst Christmas Eve of my life. 1 year since the truth blew apart on Eric and Brittany's dining table. 1 year since I ended 8 years of silent sacrifice. 1 year since I started living like a free man again. Today is November 25th, 2025. Almost a month before Christmas. But for the first time in a long time, I can already feel the season. Not the season of obligation. Not the season of pretending. Not the season of being tolerated. A season of quiet, of gentleness, of peace. A home rebuilt and a man rebuilt. With it, my little house in Spokane Valley looks nothing like it did a year ago. I fixed the porch, replaced the window that had been stuck since 2017, replanted the backyard garden, the one Maria always dreamed would have a full row of lavender along the fence. I painted the kitchen a softer cream, warm enough to ease the winter mornings. It took me 8 years to sustain a family I no longer belonged to. Now I spend each day rebuilding myself. Morning walks through the park, afternoon tea with the newspaper, evening radio humming old country songs. A small life, but for the first time, it's mine. Eric, a year, learning how to be a man again. There was no dramatic explosion, no shouting in the streets, no I left Brittany the next day. No. Their marriage didn't end like a storm. It died like a door slowly closing, and neither of them bothered to stop it. Eric has been living separately since April 2025. A tiny apartment near downtown, paying his own bills, burning his first attempts at cooking, learning the hard way what adulthood really costs. The first months were rough, then steadier. He found a therapist, cut back work hours, started running in the mornings, stopped attending the staged, pretentious gatherings of the Whitmore clan. Piece by piece he stepped out of the shadow Brittany built around him. Once a month he visits me, not for money, not for pity, not for help, just to practice being a son again. Dad, I'm trying. That's all he ever says. I don't praise him. I don't blame him. But I see it. And for me, that is enough. Brittany and the Whitmores, paying the price the quiet way. No scandals, no arrests, no public shaming, just consequences, the kind that sting the people who fear embarrassment more than failure. Brittany, patient, slowly stopped requesting her. Management moved her to low-volume shifts. She ended up back at her parents' house, the classy wife image crumbling overnight. No one attacked her. But the silence of Spokane, that was punishment enough. Charles and Linda. The community center assigned them mandatory volunteer hours after several complaints about their attitude toward seniors. Not a harsh penalty, but for people who worship their social standing, it was a deep cut. And Eric, the one thing he learned for certain was that he was never part of that elite family. He was simply used. Maria's letter. The one truth I needed. I found it while clearing the old wooden cabinet, her handwriting soft and slanted. Vince, don't let your kindness turn into a chain around your neck. If someone treats you like a burden, walk away. Choose the people who choose you. I read it twice. The first time it hurt. The second time, it healed. Maria saw it long before I did. I just needed a year to understand her words. November 25th, 2025. Eric comes home the right way. Wind swept hard against the siding when Eric knocked. But it wasn't the knock of desperation from last year. Not the man dragged by his wife's world. Not the son who let others decide the worth of his father. It was Eric, plain honest rebuilt. "Dad," he said slowly, steadily, "if you're not busy this year, would you spend Christmas with me? No promises, no dramatic vows, no begging, just an invitation. Simple, sincere, and for the first time it felt real." I nodded. No hugs, no tears, no soft music, but something warm settled in my chest, warmer than any Christmas in the last decade. Last year I was pushed out of the table. This year I was invited, a month early. Last year I was seen as a burden. This year I am a choice. And that is what a real family is. Not the people you have to pay to stay close, but the ones who walk back on their own. This year I finally have that. If you're watching this story, if you have ever sacrificed for your children, ever been dismissed, ever been pushed aside from the table you built, tell me where you're watching from. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more stories about dignity, justice, and the quiet strength of people who've endured more than anyone knows. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. You deserve a Christmas where you are finally the one being chosen.